Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I saw that Goodreads has had a sort of celebration of sci-fi and fantasy. I don't know if it's a week or a month, but regardless, they've put out some pretty fun articles in the past week about sci-fi and fantasy, and I thought that it would be fun to review this list that they've put out of the 72 most popular fantasy novels of the past 3 years. And the reason I thought this would be fun is because I have been trying to work my way back through a bunch of really well-known and well-loved series that are not necessarily new. Some of them are pretty old, but I've still been trying to balance it, I guess, with some newer fantasy, and I kind of wanted to see how I did. And I was interested to see how many out of these 72 that I've read versus how many of these I own but haven't read yet because my physical TBR is a mountain. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with this information of books that I own but haven't read, but my goal is hopefully to work some of them into a TBR sometime soon so that I can get to some of these newer, really popular books. So let's have a look at this list. Like I said, it does have 72 books on it. It was posted on July 11th, so only a couple days ago when I'm filming this, and probably about a week ago at the time that you're seeing this. But I'm really curious to see what's represented here. So the thumbnail shows some pretty good books, and so fantasy genre is arguably the single oldest genre in all of storytelling. It has roots in mythology and folklore, which is very true. And yeah, I really like that introduction. So published in 2019 or later, and the first series published if it's part of the first book if it's part of a series. So that all makes sense. Okay, so from this first 3 that they have on the list, I've read 2 of them, so that's pretty good. So that's a total of 2. And then From Blood and Ash doesn't really interest me, mostly because not anything to do with the fact that it's a romance, but I've heard that the books go downhill in that series. So 2, and then I've read 2 from this row as well. Ninth House I read a while ago now, I think at the end of 2019, and then The Starless Sea. The Starless Sea wasn't my favorite, but I think that if I knew going in what the book was like, I might have appreciated it more. And House of Earth and Blood I have on Kindle, and so I don't know whether to make that my first Sarah J. Maas or not, because I've never read her before. And on the next, so all of these are on my radar, of course. I haven't read Priory of the Orange Tree or The 10,000 Doors of January, but I have read Piranesi, and it was actually just on my top 10 of the first half of the year because it was an extremely fascinating book. Even though I only gave it 4 stars, and that's reflected here, like I said when I talked about it, it just stuck with me, and so it has that staying power. So how many is that? I believe that's 5 books that I have read. Oh, and the other thing is that we were at 1 that I own but haven't read, House of Earth and Blood. So on this one, we're coming to 6, with Under the Whispering Door being one that I have read, and then 2 that I own but have not read because of the Atlas 6, and I have the self-pub edition of that one. And then Ariadne is kind of on my radar because I like mythological stuff, but I don't own this one and I have not read it. But the other 2, The Once and Future Witches, I have on Kindle, and She Who Became the Sun I do have a physical copy of, so that makes it 4 that I own, and none of these that I've read. But I have read Rhythm of War, so 7 books on this list that I've read, and these other 2, The City We Became and Gods of Jade and Shadow, I don't have those, but I will possibly eventually get to the Jemison. I do want to read the Broken Earth trilogy first by her though. And then if we continue on, ooh, this has quite the blue and gold theme going on. I really like this row, but I have not read any of them and I don't own any of them, so there's nothing to add to the list there. And if we continue on, oh, it's the same for this row. I I have not read any of these. I don't own any of them. Ever since I saw the cover though for The Year of the Witching, I have loved it. I think that that is just gorgeous. But continuing on, okay, so in this row, I have read Black Sun and Winter of the Witch, so that brings me up to 9, I believe, and Daughter of the Moon Goddess I neither own nor have read, so that does not add to anything. And then, wow, Magic Lessons, I've never even heard of that book, but The Dragon Republic is the second book, I think, in the Poppy War. I don't have any immediate plans to read the Poppy War. I'm much more interested in R.F. Kuang's Babel that's coming out later this year. And For the Wolf, I do own but haven't read. So we're at 5, I think, for that one. Then if we continue on to this row, Empire of the Vampire, I'm not overly interested in. I am interested in Middle Game, but I can't remember whether that's the first or second. Oh wait, no, I think it's the first, and then Seasonal Fears is the second. I'm interested in Seanan McGuire in general, but I don't own this one. However, The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, I do have that one on Kindle, so that brings me up to 6 for the ones that I own but have not read yet. And then this row, I don't own any of these, but I do own City of Brass. So the Kingdom of Copper and S.A. Chakraborty, that series is represented on my shelves, but not that book. Continuing on, so The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nhi Vo. I have loved that cover ever since I saw it, and I do want to read it, but I don't own it. However, the other two, The Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth, I have read that, so that brings me up to 8, I believe. And then The Shadow of the Gods I own but haven't read, which brings me up to 7. And I started with John Gwynn's other series, The Faithful and the Fallen, and I'm halfway through that. And I will finish it at some point, so I'm not exactly certain when I'll get to Shadow of the Gods, but I do plan to. Malice, Peace Talks, and The Awakening. I have not read any of those, and I do not own them either. And I can say the same for this one, although Magic for Liars is definitely a cover that I have thought was very cool ever since I first saw it. I'm not really interested in any Jay Kristoff, and I do have The Wolf and the Woodsman, I think, on Kindle. I could be mistaken. But if we continue on to the next row, this is a little bit more representation of what I have. So I have read The Empress of Salt and Fortune, so that brings me up to 9. And then both The Jasmine Throne and A Little Hatred are both on my shelves, so that also brings that number up to 9 of books that I own but haven't read. But A Little Hatred is a little bit of a technicality because I haven't even finished the first trilogy yet of the First Law World, so I most definitely will not be starting A Little Hatred until I've read the books leading up to that. Spellbreaker and The Library of the Unwritten are both not really on my radar, but Sorrowland by River Solomon is one that I have on Kindle and have not read yet, so that number is up to 10. And then I don't think anything on this row is on my radar. Well, actually, The Ruin of Kings is, but like for all 3 of these, I neither own them nor have read them. Now if we scroll down another row, so I've read A Spindle Splintered, so that brings that up to 10, and I didn't really like it that much. The Nora Roberts book is not on my radar, and A Master of Djinn by P. Djeli Clark absolutely is. I picked that up on Kindle after reading Ring Shout earlier this year because I loved P. Djeli Clark's writing style, so that number is up to 11. And my read number is up to 10. Stormcursed and A Marvelous Light are both books I believe I've never heard of before, but I have read Sword of Kaigen, and I thought Sword of Kaigen was wonderful. So we're at 11 and 11 once again. And I actually love to see Sword of Kaigen on this list as well because that is self-pub, and it's really nice to see it getting the recognition. Now this row, I don't think I've heard of either of the ones on the outside, and The Burning White by Brent Weeks, I do have the first in that series on Kindle, but I don't have any immediate plans to read it, so I don't know whether that one counts or not. I picked it up because it was on sale, but I forget the name of the series. That's not a series that I'm really motivated to read anytime soon. I probably will eventually read it, but we'll see. Continuing on, I do have The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke on my shelf, so that number is up to 12. And The Girl in the Stars and The First Girl Child are both ones that I've heard of the Mark Lawrence book. I have not heard of The First Girl Child, but those are both ones that aren't really on my radar. So Holy Sister, another Mark Lawrence, is definitely part of a series. That series sort of piqued my interest, but once again, it's not really on my short list. And Seanan McGuire, I'm more interested in her adult novels like Middle Game than I am in the Wayward Children series, although the Wayward Children series does sound appealing to me to read at some point. And this just seems like another mythological retelling, which I do love, but I did not know about this book. So I can't say that it was like on my list or anything. Then we have another 3 books that I have not heard of. Well, actually, I've heard of Kakei, but I don't know what it's about. That does have a really cool cover though. And, oh, that's it. That's the end of the list. So what did we end up with here? Let me go through once again and do a quick speedy count. Okay, so I'm not sure if I was entirely accurate during my scroll through the list, but my final count is 13 books out of 72 that I have read, and 13 out of 72 books in my possession that I have not read. So that is surprisingly equal. I was not expecting it to be quite so like level with each other. I guess that's not bad actually, because half of the books represented on this list that are on my radar, I have read them already. So that's not bad. Now, I'm not making this an official addition to my TBR. I'm gonna see how I feel about that later, but among the ones that I own but haven't read yet, I would say that the ones that I'm the most eager to get to would probably be She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten, The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, and A Master of Gin by P. Djeli Clark. And all of the ones that I own from this list are ones that I am really interested in and excited about, but I feel like there are ones that in my head I know are coming up like ahead of the others in terms of my motivation and my interest. So having listed those, maybe I'll make them a priority. I do think that this list is great just for illustrating like what has made a name for itself in fantasy in the past couple years and the direction that genre is going. And I love to see the shift to like so much more diversity in culture and in the stories being told. I know that classical fantasy is mostly Western inspired, but I really do feel like the genre is moving away from that, and I think that that's a great thing because those stories are still being told, but now we're getting so many more perspectives and the potential for like so many more fantastic stories. So I really like to look at lists like this, and I'm pretty happy with how I've done. I mean, I know that 13 out of 72 read is not a huge number, but just based on my reading habits, I really didn't think it was going to be that high, so I'm happy with it. So I will most definitely link this list in my description below so that you can have a look at it as well, and let me know in the comments if you feel like it, how many you've read from this list, and what you think of the list and how it's representing the current state of fantasy. Now, that is going to be it for this one, so please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and as always, I will have all of my socials, Discord, and Patreon linked in the description below if you're interested in any of that stuff. And with that said, I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!